A man matched with a woman on an app last month, and the conversation was genuinely good for about 3 days straight. Then she mentioned she had a 4-year-old, and he stopped replying within roughly 11 minutes of receiving that message. He did not send an explanation, and he did not say anything unkind, and he simply stopped and never opened the app again that week. That exact interaction happened several million times last year, and almost nobody is discussing why it happens so consistently. The conversation that does exist is usually one of two versions, and both versions are genuinely useless to everyone involved. Version 1 says, men who avoid single mothers are shallow and immature and afraid of responsibility and probably not real men. Version 2 says something considerably worse than that about the women involved, and we are not doing version 2 today at all. We are doing the third version, which is the honest one, and the honest one is more interesting than either of the other two. Quick thing before we get into this, because it connects directly to everything we are about to cover in this video today. I wrote a book called The Modern Stoic, and it is at Mind Overman's shop. And it is not something you read once and forget about. All right, now let us get into what is actually happening when a man sees that message and quietly decides not to reply to it. The first thing to understand is that the decision is almost never about the woman herself, and it is about the arithmetic. He's not calculating her worth as a person, and he is calculating what the specific structure of the situation demands of him. And that structure has features that are genuinely different from dating someone without children, and pretending otherwise is silly. The first structural feature is time, and it is the most immediately obvious one, and also the one most people underestimate badly. A woman with a young child has significantly less discretionary time, and the time she does have is scheduled around someone else. Dating in the early stages requires unstructured time, where two people can figure out whether they actually like each other. When that time is limited to alternating weekends, the process of figuring each other out takes considerably longer than usual. A man in his 30s who is trying to determine compatibility efficiently will notice this constraint immediately and weigh it. He's not rejecting her, and he is noticing that the discovery phase will take 8 months instead of 2 and pricing that in. The second structural feature is that there is a third adult permanently involved in the situation, and that adult is not going anywhere. The father exists, and he will exist for the next 14 years, and he has opinions and schedules and a legal relationship to the child. That means the man entering this situation is not entering a relationship with one person, and he is entering a system with 3 adults. Sometimes that system is functional and the co-parenting is smooth and everyone behaves like reasonable adults about everything. Sometimes it is not, and the man discovers he has entered an ongoing conflict that predates him by 6 years and involves lawyers. That uncertainty is a genuine risk factor, and men who have been through the bad version are extremely cautious about it afterward. The third structural feature is emotional. And it is the one that men have the hardest time articulating clearly when asked about it. A man entering a relationship with a mother of young children will eventually become a figure in those children's lives somehow. That is not optional, and it happens whether he plans for it or not, and it happens faster than most men expect it to happen. And then if the relationship ends, he disappears from those children's lives, and the disappearing is genuinely painful for everyone. Men who have done this once frequently describe it as one of the hardest things they have experienced in their adult lives. A man who has been through that once thinks very carefully before entering a situation where it could happen a second time. That caution is not selfishness, and it is arguably the opposite of selfishness because it is about protecting a child from loss. The fourth structural feature is financial, and this is the one that gets the most attention and deserves the least, honestly. The stereotype says men avoid single mothers because they do not want to pay for someone else's children, and that stereotype is lazy. Most men who avoid these situations are not calculating the cost of a child's shoes, and they are thinking about something else. They are thinking about the fact that financial entanglement with a household that has a legal structure attached is complicated. A man who moves in with a woman who has children may be creating legal obligations he did not intend and does not fully understand. That is worth understanding before entering, and most men do not understand it, and the ones who do are appropriately cautious about it. Now, here is where this gets genuinely funny in the specific way that human behavior is funny when you observe it honestly. The men who are most avoidant of this situation are frequently the men who would be best at it if they actually tried it. They are the ones running the analysis and thinking about the child's well-being and considering the co-parent dynamic seriously. Meanwhile, the men who do not think about any of this at all will happily move in after 6 weeks and cause enormous damage. The thoughtful men select themselves out, and the careless men select themselves in, and everyone involved gets a worse outcome. Now let us talk about the version of this conversation that is genuinely unfair, because I do not want to be dishonest here. The way single mothers are discussed in certain corners of the internet is contemptuous, and it is also frequently inaccurate. A significant percentage of single mothers did not choose that situation, and it happened to them rather than being their plan. He left, or he was abusive, or he died, or the marriage failed for reasons that involved 2 people rather than 1 person alone. Treating an entire category of women as a single type with a single story is exactly the kind of lazy thinking men complain about. And a man who dismisses a woman entirely based on one fact about her situation is doing something he would resent if reversed. Some of the best women available in the dating market right now are single mothers, and the men who know this are not talking about it. They are not talking about it because they are dating those women, and they have no interest in increasing their own competition. That is not a joke, and it is a genuine market dynamic, and the quiet men have noticed something the loud men have not noticed yet. A woman who has raised a child alone has demonstrated things about her character that are extremely difficult to fake or perform. She has been tested in ways that most people have not been tested, and the results of that testing are usually visible to anyone paying attention. There's a fifth structural feature that almost nobody mentions, and it is the one that men discover only after entering. The role available to him is genuinely undefined, and nobody involved can tell him what it is supposed to look like exactly. He is not the father, and he is not a babysitter, and he is not a friend, and there is no established name for what he is. Every decision about discipline and schedules and school events requires a negotiation that has no default setting attached. Can he correct the child, and should he attend the school play, and what does he do when the child says he is not the dad? Men who like clear roles find this genuinely disorienting, and most men like clear roles because clear roles are efficient. That ambiguity is a real cost, and it is not selfish to weigh it, and men who weigh it are being realistic rather than cowardly. Now, there's also something worth saying about how this situation changes as everyone involved gets older across time. A man at 25 and a man at 40 are evaluating completely different versions of the same situation entirely. The 25-year-old has never had children and is being asked to start with someone else's, and that is a large ask. The 40-year-old may already have children and understands the terrain and is significantly less intimidated by any of it, which is why the dating market for single mothers looks completely different depending on which age bracket you examine. Younger men avoid it in large numbers, and older men are considerably more open to it, and both responses make complete sense. So a woman who feels rejected by the market at 30 may find the market at 38 to be a totally different place. That is genuinely useful information, and it almost never appears in the conversations happening about this topic online. Now, let us also acknowledge something that complicates the entire analysis in a way that is worth sitting with honestly. The men who are most vocal about avoiding single mothers are frequently not being pursued by anyone in the first place. It is remarkably easy to hold firm standards about a category of women who have not expressed any interest in you at all. That is not a decision, and it is a preference dressed as a decision, and the difference matters more than people admit. A real decision involves an actual person who is actually available and an actual weighing of what she brings to the table. Everything else is theory, and theory is cheap, and the internet is currently full of men trading theory with other men. Now let us talk about what a man should actually do with all of this, because the analysis is useless without a direction attached. The first thing is to stop treating this as a category decision and to start treating it as an individual evaluation every time. Single mother is not a category. It is a circumstance, and circumstances vary enormously across the people who are in them. A woman with a 15-year-old who is nearly out of the house is in a completely different situation than a woman with a toddler. A woman with a cooperative co-parent is in a different situation than one who is in year 6 of an ongoing legal conflict. These are not the same, and treating them as the same is the exact intellectual laziness that produces bad decisions everywhere. The second thing is to be honest with yourself about what you actually want and what you're actually capable of handling. If you genuinely do not want to be involved in raising a child who is not yours, that is a legitimate position to hold, honestly. It is not noble, and it is not shameful, and it is a preference, and preferences do not require justification to anyone at all. The dishonest version is dating her anyway and hoping it works out, and then leaving 18 months later when it does not. That version causes real damage to real children, and the men who do it are causing more harm than the men who declined initially. So, knowing yourself is not cowardice, and it is the specific thing that prevents you from hurting people who did not deserve it. The third thing is to actually meet the situation before evaluating it, because most men are evaluating a stereotype instead. You do not know what her life looks like, and you do not know how her co-parenting works, and you do not know her child at all. 3 conversations will tell you more than any amount of theorizing, and theorizing is what most men are doing instead of asking. Ask how the co-parenting works, and ask what her schedule actually looks like, and ask what she wants a partner's role to be. Those 3 questions produce more useful information in 10 minutes than a year of reading opinions on the internet ever will. And her answers will tell you very quickly whether this specific situation is one you can actually handle or genuinely cannot. Now, to every man watching this who has quietly closed a conversation after seeing that message and felt slightly bad about it, You are allowed to have preferences, and you are allowed to decline situations that do not fit the life you are trying to build. That is not a moral failure, and dating is the one area of life where declining without explanation is entirely acceptable. But there is a difference between declining a specific situation and dismissing an entire category of people without looking. The first is discernment, and the second is laziness, and the second one costs you options you might have genuinely wanted. The men who evaluate individually end up with better outcomes than the men who filter categorically, and that is consistently true. Because categorical filters remove good options along with bad ones, and good options are rare enough to be worth examining. Now here is what I actually want you to take from this, because I do not want it to end as commentary about dating apps. The underlying skill in this entire video is the ability to evaluate a situation on its actual merits, rather than its label. That skill applies to jobs and to friendships and to business opportunities and to almost every significant decision you make. Most men run on labels because labels are fast, and evaluation is slow, and slow feels expensive when you are busy and tired. But labels are wrong often enough that running on them will cost you significantly more than the evaluation would have cost. The man who evaluates deliberately makes fewer decisions, and better ones and better decisions compound across an entire life. Drop one honest word in the comments below describing where you are on this topic right now at this exact moment today. Cautious, open, decided, learning, honest. Whatever single word is most genuinely true for you sitting there right now. Because somewhere below your comment is a man about to make this decision based entirely on something he read online. Your one word might be the thing that gets him to actually ask the 3 questions instead of just closing the conversation. Every week on this channel, we cover what men actually need to hear without softening any of it for the sake of comfort. That is what Mind Over Man is here for, and see you next week, and evaluate deliberately because labels are usually wrong.